Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited for today's video. It is going to be my fourth update in my Pan That palette, which this year I am working on for the first time. This is my first year doing a Pan That palette, and I am working on my Abh Sultry palette. And so far, it's been going okay. It's been going well. I do have an exciting update. I have a new pan to share with you guys. I have quite a bit of use, but also there's some like disappointing aspects to this update as well. And a little side note, a little spoiler, I'm gonna give myself May off. I'm going to not really give myself any sort of focus, anything. I will let myself reach for this palette organically. I think I might give myself a goal of reaching for it like a minimum of 8 times, but I'm feeling like a little bit burnt out with this palette. I am kind of sick of doing cool tone looks, and I'm excited to do more looks like I have today, like a brighter, warmer, whatever for spring and summer. So we're gonna see where the month of May takes us. I am a little bit worried about just thinking through what my usage is gonna look like through the summer, but then I will buckle down again in the fall. Not saying I'm not gonna use this palette at all the next few months, but I'm gonna give myself a little bit of like a break because I'm starting to feel a little bit of Pan That palette fatigue. We will get into all of that during this update though, so if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. All right, you guys, inevitably every update of mine seems to be like formatted a little bit different. This will likely be no exception, but I will post on the screen footage of what my palette was looking like at the last update, which during the last update, I did have 6 pans going in this palette, which was super exciting. I was really close to finishing off that first shade in Fresh. And now I will insert footage of what this palette is looking like today. So super exciting. You will see that we have finished off our first shade in this palette, which I am so excited about. And then I'm hoping you'll be able to notice that we do have a new pan in the shade Teak, which is super exciting. I haven't yet looked at the like side-by-side comparison photos, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to see Birch has an expansion, as well as Steampunk may have a bit of a deeper dip, and Cinder a little bit maybe of an expansion in the Rose Quartz shade, but this is what this palette is currently looking like. I'm very excited to go shade by shade with you guys and share what each shade looks like. Okay, my camera literally just stopped filming and shut off on me, which is super weird. It's not like the battery's fully charged, everything's good. So I have it back on. Hopefully everything that I just shared came through, but I'm super excited to go shade by shade. I will quickly pop on the screen a photo or photos from when we started this project all the way to where we are at now. So we have definitely made some really exciting, really good progress. I've hit pan on 3 shades so far this year. I have fully completed a shade, and I am just really hopeful looking at this palette. No matter what, I will be decluttering this palette at the end of the year. My hope is that I'll have a pan at bare minimum in every single shade, and I would be hopeful that I could finish up at least 4 or 5 of the shades to completion. 6 would make me really happy, or 7 would make me really happy, because that would be half of the palette. But regardless of where we're at, this palette will be getting decluttered at the end of the year. I will go through now shade by shade and let you know how many times I've used each shade and maybe any sort of goals that I have. Not for next month, but just within this project, because again, feeling a little bit burnt out, feeling like I'm going to take May and just kind of only use this palette as what I'm thinking is Mondays and Fridays, which are my 2 work days that I leave for work much earlier, I can use this palette just because I can do like a simple quick go-to look. But aside from that, I'd like to reach for other things. So anyway, let's go shade by shade. Up first, we have the shade Fresh, which is our first complete shade in this palette. I did reach for Fresh an additional 8 times, putting me at 69 total uses within this project to complete this shade. Now, the shade did have a pan in it when we started this project, pretty significant, and I use this as an all over lid setting shade, so this was not a hard pan to finish, but we have our first finished shade. Right next to that, we have the shade Pearl, which Pearl I reached for an additional 5 times, putting me at 38 total uses within this project. I am really excited just thinking through like where Pearl was when we started this project to where Pearl is now. We have made some very, very significant progress, and I'm very excited to see just how large the pan is for Pearl, and also I feel like the rest of the shade that's still there is getting pretty thin, specifically on like the right side of the pan. So I am really hopeful that this can be a completed shade by the end of the year. Then we move along to Steampunk, which was a focus shade for me this past month. I was hoping to reach for this 10 times. I did only reach for it 8 times, putting me at 15 total uses, but I am really happy that I did reach for it those 8 times. And I'm hoping that the pan is, you know, significantly deeper, somewhat deeper. Then last update, I still feel like there's a ways to go with Steampunk, and it's definitely not a favorite shade of mine. It is more of like this golden sort of shade, and I just don't always love gold on my eyes, but that is where we're at with Steampunk. Moving on to Rose Quartz. I forgot to mention at the beginning of this that I was gonna give myself a goal of, for the first 6 months of the year, trying to reach for each shade within the palette at least the number of months that we were in. So for January, reach for each shade once, February, reach for each shade twice, and it was April that I wasn't able to hit this goal. I did not reach for each shade in this palette a minimum of 4 times. So Rose Quartz, I only reached for 2 total times, putting me at 22 total uses. I don't know if it'll look like the pan has expanded much at all. I am interested in trying this shade out as a nail polish, hopefully sometime within the next month, and I think we'll see some expansion there. I do really like this shade. I am hopeful this could be one of the shades that I finish off to completion. It is one of my more favorite shades in this palette, but I just didn't reach for it that much this past month because I was focused on more of the like golds and browns in this palette rather than the shade Rose Quartz. So only reached for that 2 times this past month, 22 total uses within this project for Rose Quartz. Then we move on to Ember, one of my least used shades in this palette. I reached for Ember a total of 4 times in this project, or 4 total times this past month, putting me at 13 total uses within this project. I'll be curious to see if there's much of a significant change here. I feel like obviously there is a disturbance, there's a dip going, but this is just not the type of shade that I'm reaching for all that frequently. I feel like I could get some good use out of this in the fall months, but I'm just not super inspired by this shade. So this one has been slow moving. Then we move on to Bloom, which I didn't reach for at all this past month. I have been using Bloom more as a blush, and I do think I'll get a lot of use out of Bloom this spring and summer because I can make a blush out of it. I was also thinking about mixing some of Bloom and Pearl together to kind of franken like a shimmery like coral sort of shade, but I haven't gotten around to doing that yet. More to come on if I actually get the courage to do that, but it's a thought in my mind. Then we move along to Birch, which is my second most used shade in this palette. I reached for Birch a total of 12 times this past month, which this was another focus shade. I wanted to reach for this at least 10 times. Birch is a really easy shade for me to reach for. I have reached for this 44 total times within this project, and if you could believe it, this actually didn't have a pan on this, or I didn't have a pan on this shade at the beginning of this year. So I'm very excited to like look down and see that really large pan going. This is another shade that I'm very hopeful can be an empty or can be a completed shade by the end of the year. I think that is very doable because this is a warmer shade. Like I could reach for this shade all spring, summer long. I do really like the shade Birch, but it's most of the other shades I'm kind of getting burnt out with. Moving to the bottom row, we have Cinder. Cinder I reached for a total of 7 times, putting me at 17 total uses. I am really happy with my like usage on Cinder this past month. I wasn't planning to use this one. It wasn't a focus shade, but I've only reached for it 17 times this project. I'll be excited to see if the dip is any bigger. I feel like it might be. Maybe, I'm like, what's gonna be my next pan? I likely won't. Cinder might be my best shot at a new pan for the next month, but I don't feel super inspired to reach for it. We might not have a new pan next month. We'll see. But that's my progress on Cinder. Moving on to Twig, I only reached for Twig 2 times this past month. Again, just not really feeling these super cool toned looks. I have reached for Twig a total of 12 times within this project. Twig actually did have a pan when we entered this project. Twig was one of my more favorite shades when I first got this palette. So I do feel like the shadow is getting thinner around where the pan is, but I'm not 100% sold this could be a complete shade by the end of the year, just because I I don't know how much this pan has even expanded this year, and it's just not a shade that I love like I used to. So then moving on to Teak, we have our newest pan to this palette. I reached for Teak a total of 9 times. Goal was to reach for it 10, I reached for it 9 times, putting me at 20 total uses in this project, and I have a good pan going there. Again, feeling burnt out by the looks that I create with with a shadow such as Teak, but I do feel like the product is really thin around the pan, and I could expand this pan pretty quickly. And I could probably get quite a bit of good use out of this in the fall as well. Or like a sultry summer smoky eye. I mean, I'll get use out of this, but can you guys tell I'm feeling burnt out? Next up, we have the shade Dystopian, which I actually reached for 12 total times. Wasn't intending to reach for Dystopian that much, but I did. Dystopian already had a pan on it when we entered this project. It used to be my go-to brow shade. I've used it some as a brow shade, but I've actually used it some just to like deepen up my outer corner. I've also used it in my hairline, and I don't know, you won't really probably be able to tell in pictures that I'm getting somewhat of a dip in the center now. This is a shade that's very dry, like very dry. It does not, I don't know if it's always been that way or my quality is just declining, but it's not my favorite shade to use like in an eye look, just because I feel like it's like losing, it's not that good, and it kind of blends patchy, etc. But I've continued to use it in the hairline. I'll continue to use it from time to time in the brows, and we'll just see if we can expand that pan some, at least before the end of the year. I have reached for this 38 total times this year, so I actually have reached for this quite a bit, but it's also a little bit more firmly pressed, and it's just so dry, and ugh. So that's where we're at there. Next up, we have the shade Cyborg, which has been one of my least used shades and one of the shades that has caused me some hesitation, but I did reach for this a total of 5 times this past month. In fact, this is the first shade that I tried ever using as a nail polish, and I will say I did kind of enjoy it. I could see myself using Cyborg again as a nail polish and hoping to eventually hit pan in this one. I don't think this will be a shade I use up by any means. It's a beautiful shade, but it's just not one that I'm reaching for from a day-to-day, like on a day-to-day basis, to use it enough to have this as a complete shade by the end of the year. So that's where we stand with Cyborg. Moving on to Slate. Slate I also didn't reach for at all. I have reached for Slate only 6 times in this project. I just do not use a gray. I'm not doing gray smoky eyes, black smoky eyes. It's just not my jam. This is the shade that like I don't know if I'll be able to hit pan. Like I'm really not sure that I'll be able to use this shade up. But I am gonna try and hit pan somehow. So we'll see. Although I didn't use it at all. We'll just have to see. And then moving on to Nior, I reached for Nior 5 total times, putting me at 12 total uses in this project. I would mix Nior and Dystopian together to fill my hairline in some, and that's how I got quite a, well, not quite a bit, got 5 uses out of it. Nior, I think I'll be able to hit pan in. I'm not going to use it up by any means, but I do think I'll be able to at least hit a pan in it. I feel like there should be a bigger dip going in this, but there's really not much of a dip or not much of a change, I don't think, from the last update. But that is where we stand with Nior, and that is where we currently sit with my Sultry Pan That palette. Looking at it, like I am really proud of the progress that I've made, but I just feel like I need a bit of a break. So again, my goal is going to be to reach for this, should I say 10 times? Like 8 feels like, I'm gonna say 10 times because I can reach for Birch very easily, but reach for this palette in some capacity 10 total times. I would like to use Rose Quartz as a nail polish and potentially maybe Cinder as a nail polish and try to hit pan on Cinder. Maybe I will do that. But if I reach for this, and maybe Pearl as an inner corner highlight a few more times, or even as a highlight, maybe Bloom as a blush, I'm gonna try and reach this 10 times, but really not gonna be too hard on myself. I don't know that next update will be the most exciting, but this is what my ABH Sultry palette is currently looking like. If you guys have any suggestions, anything you'd like to see me try to do with this palette, let me know in the comments. I always love reading your guys' suggestions and have definitely taken some to get more use out of this palette. So thank you guys so much as always. But that is gonna wrap it up for today's update for this Pan That palette update. I would love to know if you are currently working on a palette for the year. Do you have a focus palette for the year? What is it? How's it going? Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.